as we continue this series where I go back and look at old videos and see how badly I butchered talking about good movies and potentially correcting myself, hoping to correct myself, we come to a particularly egregious and embarrassing example. And the main reason it's really embarrassing, I think, is because for some reason this is a video that has, as of right now, as I'm filming this, 1.5 thousand views, which for our channel is a lot. It's like in that area where you can see, like, your most viewed videos and stuff like that. It's in that list somewhere. And this was one that I really did dirty. It's Girlfight, which I did in a versus with $1 Million Baby. And the problem is that before I really got the hang of versus, which was recently, I would just talk about one movie, and then I would talk about the other, and that would be it. And I talked about $1 Million Baby for so long, I think I just got tired of talking. That happened a lot, doing verses that way. So by the time I got to Girlfight, I really didn't say much of anything at all. I talked about $1 Million Baby for probably like half an hour, and then I talked about Girlfight for maybe 10 minutes, and at least half of that 10 minutes was just synopsis. So, like I said, especially the fact that apparently so many people saw that, has always been something that's really... I had to come back to Girlfight somehow. So this might have been a big driving factor in doing this whole series to begin with. So, let's see how badly I butchered this.
Well, first, it was one of those breakout Sundance movies. It was the year 2000. It was Michelle Rodriguez's first movie, if I remember correctly. Because it was the year before The Fast and the Furious. I guess it's kind of disheartening when you look at it now. Because she's so good. Having just basically going to an audition and getting the part. I think there were like 300 people that she had to fight through or something to get the part. Through auditions, not like the movie. No, she feels perfectly cast. But the great thing that she does here, that's when I say disheartening, is that she shows something here to where she has that tough. It's that Michelle Rodriguez character we know. But in this performance, there's something underneath that's really, she's got like a vulnerability about her. There's really potent emotion in there. It's just a really, really real performance. Something that directors she worked with after this movie basically decided to ignore completely. And they're like, you remember the exterior of that performance? Just do that all the time. Don't bother with the other stuff you did.
Okay, so I definitely still agree with that ending bit about it being disheartening about how Michelle Rodriguez has been used in her career and how she hasn't really gotten the chance to really show what she has and what she can do, which is kind of given her a bad rap as an actress, where people can say, oh, she just kind of does one thing. I've been seeing this joke floating around where it's, like, the caption is, Michelle Rodriguez if Fast and the Furious didn't exist, and then it's like a gif of somebody working at McDonald's. And while it might be funny to say that, offhand, it is the case where when you're not really given a reason to sort of hone your craft as an actress, when you see the projects that she's in, you don't really get the chance to hone your craft, so you just don't. And then she just kind of gets boxed in, and from being boxed in, playing this same tough character so often, she's just kind of grown monotone, and I feel like that's kind of against her will. And especially when you look at it here, when, like I was saying, it was her first movie, and how I did talk about how she's the tough exterior, but she's got the vulnerability, but there's even more. You can still elaborate on that more, where it's like you see Diana in this movie, and you just get the sense immediately in her first couple of scenes that she can walk into pretty much any situation completely and totally fearless, but how there's still like this, and almost naively, I guess you could say, but you get the sense that she feels like she's completely fearless, especially since there's this anger inside of her. This anger, like, it's the anger of like a reckless youth, but still, it's there, and it's not an unfounded anger, because we see that, there's a lot of focus on her environment and how bad the environment is. Her and Adrian even talk about this is something shared between them. And there's that, there's, her mother and her mother's suicide, there's the antagonism she's getting at school, there's getting pressured into being something she's not when her dad's telling her to like wear a skirt and stuff like that. And you can just see where all of this is coming from, but at the same time, talking about that vulnerability, it's not just her playing vulnerable. She's playing a character that seems to underestimate her vulnerability, and the way she's able to play that really well. And we get that great scene at the end after everything has happened and she's won her fight and she's just sitting alone and it's like all the emotions happen at once. And it's like that's just a perfect moment. And then everything in between, whether it be playing the love story or, you know, the determined fighter story or whatever it is, there's definitely multiple layers to what she's got going on here, and she's able to play them all. And like I said, it is continuing on that also, it is really a shame that it does feel like she's kind of been boxed in, because she's definitely a better actress than people will give her credit for. She just has never really been given a chance to show it after this.
It bothers me a little bit that his name is Adrian, because this very much this very much has a Rocky feel. So I can't help but wonder if that was a bit of an obvious reference, naming her boyfriend.
Well, that was just a dumb thing to say, because obviously it's intentional. And talking about it being, you know, not only this sort of Rocky-inspired movie, but the fact that there is a gender reversal where the person that the hero is drawn to and falls in love with is named Adrian still, but the genders are reversed, is actually quite clever and doesn't really feel like it's, you know, just a reference to be a reference. So that we can just completely disregard that comment.
Obviously, she has to have a love interest. But there's more to it than just him being her love interest.
Yeah, and that's just another instance of me falling short, because I kind of started to go into, yeah, it's not like a typical, you know, love story or a typical romance within the movie, and then I just didn't elaborate when there's quite a bit to elaborate on with that. For the starters, I love the way they just bring Adrian into the story, where it's not like this sort of meet-cute scenario, or even this sort of one glance kind of thing. They show him sporadically before he kind of comes into the plot, where there's the moment when they just happen to be in the gym at the same time, and it looks like he notices her for a second, and then he just goes about with what he was doing, like he barely even clocked her existence at all. And kind of same for her. And then there's the moment where we see him again, and then his girlfriend shows up, and then obviously she does clock that, because he's gotten her attention by now. And then, as we've been doing this distant thing, finally there's the moment where he offers to give her a ride. And then that's its own thing, and then we get this pretty long date scene. It's probably like 7 to 9 minutes or something, but for being like right in the middle of the movie, it feels like this nice, intentionally long segment where we just take the time to watch them sort of get to know each other. It's not like the movie's just doing this to get to a certain point. Like, it's not putting them together just so it can go, oh, and now there's going to be conflict because they're fighting in the climax. It really takes the time to just make it feel like this relationship it's where we're not sure and they're not sure if it's a relationship at this point, but they're kind of on a date, and there's something that feels really real about it, where, like, you know, there's the moment where they share the sandwich because she feels like he doesn't eat enough. There's, like I was talking about before, where they relate to their bad environment together. And the way that it avoids drama with that girlfriend character that we really barely meet. And that could seem like it's something that's not really strong enough character-wise, but once again, it feels intentional that we don't really get to know that girlfriend character at all, because it seems like they're barely together at all. Like, they're both kind of in it for this sort of convenience is what it seems, but it's more inconvenient for him. And so there's not really a lot to, like, it's, because there's not much of an attachment between them, there's not really going to be any forced conflict where it's like a love triangle kind of thing, which would have been the worst. So the best thing you could have done was make it seem like this relationship with him and this girlfriend is barely a relationship at all, but it also doesn't play too hard into the drama of where Diana's coming from. Like, Diana sees him at the party, and then she leaves, and then she's angry at the gym the next day, but it's not really... We never get to the point where she says, you know, like she's yelling at him about the girlfriend. Or it's like, it's there, like, we know it's there because we've been watching, and Kusama just kind of trusts us to go on that's what the emotion is driving this. And we don't need to devote, like, whole time-draining scenes to this stuff where we know the directions that it goes. So I really like the way they handled that. And also talking about kind of an unconventional direction to go would be his refusal to have sex because of fighting and what it does to his mind when he's preparing for fights. And what I actually like about that is it does bring like an innocence to their relationship. And not that I'm saying like yay for celibacy or anything like that. I wouldn't, but it's just a nice change of pace for a movie like this, especially a movie that has like a young love kind of story in it. It feels like a different dynamic and one we don't typically see. So I really appreciate all of that. And in the way that usually it's this big moment in love stories when one of them says that they love the other person, and the timing of when it happens in this movie, when they're in the ring and they're sparring, and she says it aggressively, yet means it, is, like I said, basically every way this movie approaches the love story feels kind of unconventional and fresh, and that's just really nice to see.
The interesting thing about it is that the fights aren't that stylized. Like, they're really not at all. To the point that I'm sure some people would kind of see it as a problem, but the fights are so not stylized that the climax probably will feel very, very underwhelming.
So, yeah, I think I've maybe heard, like, maybe a couple of criticisms that some people think the fights are underwhelming or anticlimactic, but there's a lot sort of built up here. Number one, I like the way they sort of fake us out with the climax, where they set up the whole time, like, obviously they're building her up, and then, she spars guys every now and then. Like, there's the whole side plot with Ray that's kind of going on. And then, yeah, she spars with Adrian that one time, but they start to build up this one character, this other female fighter, where Hector says, like, oh, there's another one of you out there. And it's like, I like that almost seems like it's setting up the climax, that her and this other girl are going to be the final fight. And so I love that we pretty much get that fight right away, and then we go into, oh, you're going to have to fight Adrian, and that's going to be the climax of the movie. And, yeah, no, so, how it's shot is one thing. The way that it's shot is fine. And I think it does feel climatic enough. But the other thing here is that it's not really just about the fight itself. It's, like I said, how this movie feels so inspired by Rocky, obviously. And much like Rocky, yeah, the fight is what it is, but that's not... It's how we've gotten to this point. The journey to this point is what brings the power to the climax. While the fight between Rocky and Apollo is incredible, and I may or may not know like the whole choreography to it because I've watched it so many times because it's that incredible. Yeah, like what I was just talking about, the build-up between her and Adrian and how this has been built up to be such an authentic relationship and such an unconventional relationship that we're really interested in, that's what's driving what this fight is. It's not necessarily the fight itself, it's the two of them and knowing where they're both exactly coming from. That's the power of the climax and the final fight. And I was just grossly glossing over where that power is coming from and how powerful it actually is from a dramatic standpoint, even if not necessarily from a choreography standpoint or anything like that. So it's obviously a really well done climax that the whole movie has been building to, which gives it all the impact that it needs.
My only issue, honestly, is that when I first saw this movie for the very first time, I really, really loved it. When I saw it again many, many years later. It was probably a 10-year gap in between the first time I saw it and the second time I saw it. And I don't know what happened, but it's a good movie, without a doubt. But for some reason, I've never loved it the way I loved it that first time.
I think now I can say I know what happened, and I think I know what the difference was between those two viewings, and that was, apparently my opinion just sucked from about my turning 20 to like my mid-20s, because this has happened many times actually, where I've loved a movie, and then I watched it again in like this area here where around the time I rewatched Girlfight, and I didn't like them, and I like turned on them, and now I've rewatched those movies again since, now that I'm on this side of my age, and everything is getting good again. So I think I just went through a period where my opinions were bullshit and didn't matter at all, and had no bearing on the actual quality of the movies. So, yeah, I hate to make it sound like anybody that watched the videos that we put out in this era were wasting their time, but yeah, there's a lot of cases, a surprising amount of cases where my opinion in my from 20 to early 20, like mid 20s, just does not add up with how I feel now, and didn't add up with how I felt before those years. So I don't know what was going on. I don't know if I was probably going through something. I don't know, but yeah, things definitely have changed as far as a lot of my opinions in that era. And obviously, this is certainly one of those movies, and I'm really relieved too, because these are all movies that I loved loving, and I'm glad that I love them again. So this, yes, it all works out.
And the writer-director knew this and handled it really well. Her name escaped me. It's Karen something.
No, it isn't, actually. It's Karin Kusama, and I was just talking with her, or with a friend about her and her whole filmography recently, and we were talking about how her filmography is so varied, because this was her first movie, and then she went on to do Jennifer's Body and Destroyer with Nicole Kidman, Aeon Flux, the Charlize Theron sci-fi movie, The Invitation, the one about the cult with Logan Marshall Green, and a segment in the horror anthology XX. And it's a filmography that seems like it's all over the place. And when you see a filmography that varied, it makes you wonder if the director has, like, what the director's vision is. Like, can you sort of connect these movies? And that's what we were talking about. And it's crazy how completely in different places these movies can seem, and how movies that you think wouldn't be that thought-provoking, like Aeon Flux or something, how Aeon Flux was just, like, dismissed at the time as this random sci-fi movie. And Jennifer's Body was like some random horror movie at the time. And Jennifer's Body obviously has come back around. We've talked about it before on this channel. And the thing about it is, when you look at her filmography as a whole, you'll see, like, there's this theme of, like, fractured and doomed relationships throughout all of them. And how the main characters kind of, like, have this longing for a connection that once was, that's gone now. And they have this really tragic feel to them. You can even get some of that, like, in like, obviously, with how Diana, sees her mother, and how there was a life to be lived that wasn't lived now, mainly because of her father. And even when you look at Hector, when Hector has that moment where he just says, "I had my day," just, there's something in that one line that tells, like, a whole story about Hector. And you really get that sense here. And there's also a lot of stuff in her movies about healing, when you look at all of them together. And there's definitely something here also where she finds this healing through not just, through the fighting, because, like, fighting is the answer, in quotes, but, like, finding something that brought her to that place that we were talking about, that last shot after the final fight, where she's just sitting by herself, and all the emotions come, and it's like, it's sadness, it's probably some of the anger that's always been inside her, then there's some relief, then there's, like, like, she's found something, like, she's reached an accomplishment, she has something to be proud of, and she got herself here. And it's, yeah, and she made relationships along the way, like, this will probably make her closer with her brother, or she's got a relationship with Hector now. It's, yeah, she confronted her dad in a really big way, a big dramatic way, and yeah, so when you look at her filmography, it might seem like there's some movies in it that are like, well, that's just kind of random, but yeah, there's actually something here in the, Kusama sort of storytelling vein that she's created, and it's, yeah, and obviously this is a big part of it by being the start of it, so I think that's certainly what I should have said in the $1 Million Baby video back, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, however long ago it was. And I know 1.5 thousand people aren't going to see this, unfortunately, but which sucks, but that's the way it goes. But yeah, hopefully I've somehow amended and made it seem like this movie does have its place more so than I alluded to before when I was going through my shit phase or whatever it was. So that's what we have here. So we're going to go in a completely different direction now. Or are we? You can almost say maybe similar character arcs are happening. The next one, I guess, could fall under horror and thriller, with a little bit of disaster thrown in. Another movie I feel like I totally did dirty. Very much so, actually. So I'll be very happy to make amends with that. So until the next one, I think that's it.